Hey, mamas, welcome to the live Q&A with myself, Miriam Bellamy of Whole Family Neurofeeback, and Christy Knight. She's a certified health and wellness coach, and she is in the middle of a grueling graduate degree to become a neuro counselor. Thanks so much, Christy, for being with us, and thanks anybody who's listening in. And thank you for everybody for just taking a few minutes away from your Bridgerton episodes. Have you watched it, Christy? No.
All I do is study, so I don't have any fun in life.
Well, when you surface, you got to check out Bridgerton on Netflix. we finished it a couple days ago.
Oh, note to self.
Yes. So this is a live Q&A on understanding neurofeedback and ADHD. I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for 23 years. I started neurofeedback for myself and for my family. I have had my own experience of a daughter with ADHD and dyslexia, and had just such a dramatic turnaround. It went from, homework being a 2-hour crying frustration mess to finding her in her room quietly focused, doing her homework, cleaning her room. I know some moms have been asking about chores. That was one of the impacts on my daughter. And my own mental health, my own energy. I went from, struggling with a great deal of fatigue for 20 years to feeling rested and feeling very energetic. Lots of shifts that happened. And so I was so compelled to get into this field and understand it a bit better. And Christy, I know you had your own, I think part of the reason you went back to school was because of your experiences with neurofeedback. Do you want to say a little bit about where you're coming from with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Just, how impactful it's been on our life. We originally started this journey about 8 or 9 years ago now, maybe 9 years ago now. And it was actually recommended by a feeding clinic in Illinois. And they wanted to help us reduce anxiety for my son towards food. And that's how I got into it. So, fast forward, it changed not only his life, but I had 2 daughters and at the time, and had struggled periodically different times in their life. One pretty profound from about age 6 years old with ADHD and anxiety. And then the other one didn't really struggle until a little bit later. And so we just saw such profound effects with them. My husband used it. I used it. I rented the system and I just was hooking everybody up. And so we saw such profound changes in everyone. I said, okay, why do we not all have access to this? And how does this system work? And why does this work so much better? And how can I help other people not struggle and suffer? We had been like so many I know that are probably listening or that will listen at some point. We've done the medication route. We've done the diet changes. We've done the visual aids taped to the bathroom mirror. We've done the clipboards with 50 million lists. We've done the IEPs and 504s and, XYZ plans, right? We did all of that. And therapists and counseling and meds and no meds, and we'd done it all. And I wish I had had this tool for my oldest daughter in particular when she was younger, because I really think it would have changed her life. And she was the kid that I would send her to school and I would where's her lunchbox? Where's her sweater? Where's her jacket? Where's her sweater? Where's her lunchbox? And I went to the school one day and I picked up 12 sweaters. What? And 5 lunchboxes. So, that was that kid. So had I had this when she was younger, her life would have been completely different. So that's kind of where I came from and how and why I got into it, because I wanted to know. And I find myself on a continual rabbit hole, learning.
Learning more and more and more. Yep.
That's right. A learning rabbit hole. And I love it. And the more I can share with other people and help other people understand it and impact their lives, then it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. it's a nice win-win. I'll tell you, for me too. Yeah, and I often feel that way too, as I wish I had this earlier when my kids were much younger. The youngest was in middle school when we started with this. So yeah, I feel that. So we have had a lot of questions come in. If you have a question during the broadcast, please type it in. Give StreamYard permission. But if you don't, I believe that you'll just come in as just a Facebook user. Your name will be anonymous. And if you have a question and you're kind of wanting to be private about it, send me a private message. It'd be Miriam Bellamy. Just making sure I didn't have one already. It'll be just private message Miriam Bellamy, and I'll see if we can address your question in the broadcast. Let's see. So let's start with some of these questions. The biggest one we had was people wanting real life stories. So Christy and I have just shared some of our stories, but we've also worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Christy, you got a story right offhand you want to?
Sure.
You want to share?
Yeah. So when this question came up, I thought, oh, great, this is a perfect example because I have two daughters, same, mother and father, so same genetics there, right? 2 years apart, and have both struggled with ADHD. One was diagnosed when she was young, about 8 years old. The other one was about 15 before she was diagnosed. Okay. So that just goes to show you the difference in the variety of things and areas that they struggled and how it impacted them at different points in their life.
How ADHD can look so different with different people.
Yeah. And so, I saw that in my home. So with the second daughter, who was later to be diagnosed, I never dreamed it was ADHD because she was doing so many of the things that the other daughter couldn't do, right? So it never occurred to me. And so, fast forward through that process of trying to uncover, I knew she'd had some anxiety, but didn't realize that some of it was stemming from some executive function, actually, kind of things that were going on. And so that was really something I wanted to understand more, because, you have some people say you have 5 executive functions, some people say you have 7, 8, however many, it doesn't matter. But what we know is those executive functions mainly are in that front part of the brain, and they're responsible for that, like, executive function, right? So like the top things that we want to do, we want self-control, we want self-monitoring, we want organization and planning, we want flexibility and resilience, we want emotional control, task initiation, time management, working memory. Like, all of those things factor into what we call executive functions. Mm-hmm. But here's what no one will tell you. It's a secret. The secret is,
I'm ready.
Those executive functions, we don't just turn 12 years old and go through puberty and boom, now we got them. They start from the moment we're born. So because they're layered in these networks in the brain that are connected to all these other parts of the brain. So you have, let's say, flexibility, or let's take a better one would be working memory, right? So holding digits in your head. We used to think that we could hold like 5 to 7 digits of information in our head before we would forget it. Well, now neuroscience says that the average person can only hold 3 digits effectively before it goes through the memory process of encoding. So you got to hold it in memory, then you've got to encode it, you got to kind of stamp it, send it to long-term memory, and you don't really know it till the next day when you sleep. Boom, and it's like got that seal of approval, right? So if any time during this process you were interrupted by sensory, auditory, visual, motor mechanics of networks that maybe aren't functioning right, when you're learning and holding and encoding that information, then your retrieval the next day is going to be affected. So here's why that's important, because there's so many networks in the brain. There's visual, there's auditory, there's motor networks, there's sensory. So all these different functions of the brain have to work together. And then you have awareness. That's a whole other ball game. So you got all these factors that have to work together to work for working memory. And that starts when we're little, when we learn how to plan how to crawl, where we learn how to move our hands and reach for toys, when we learn how to look at mom's face and be engaged and track eye movements. Like, so these executive functions aren't things that we just, oh, she's really good at it. Like they're stepping stones from very young parts of our lives, and they incorporate so many vast networks in the brain. So that's why I had 2 daughters, same genetics, same household, raised the same, that looked very different in their executive functioning. One cannot estimate time, and she's 26 years old, and she still struggles on time estimation. The other one is literally has no problems with time management, none whatsoever. But don't give her anything emotional to deal with before she's got something important going on, or she'll fall apart. Where the other one, that doesn't bother her. She can totally handle it. So how did all that happen? Well, probably in development. Who knows? Along the way, they developed
so many factors. Yeah,
exactly. Right. So they developed differently. So now they're, 24 and 26, and the hope, ladies, is that they both graduated. They've graduated on time. They're successful, thriving, bill-paying adults that love their mother. That's what's wonderful. So that is the silver lining in all this, right? So those networks will just keep integrating and building, and that brain development isn't even done until they're about 30. So that's even better, because I still got room to improve those brains, right? When I messed up years ago, I didn't know I got so much room for improvement. So I guess, all those executive functions, they're connected to so many other parts of the brain. So they look different for everybody. Yep. So that was a tangent.
That's okay.
Sorry, I might be a little ADD tonight.
Well, yeah, the brain has so many redundant systems, and every part of the brain is integrated with every other part of the brain. So it's a whole kind of a picture, and with nonlinear neurofeedback in particular, we're looking at that whole picture, not one little thing here or here or here or whatever. So
and that is really important, because a lot of people say, well, how's it going to affect my executive function? And what I want to look at them and say, well, those are like, our executive functions aren't really all done until we're almost 30 years old. So how's it going to affect? Well, I don't know. I mean, how's it affecting them now? And those executive functions, different functions are tied to different things. Again, you may have things that are tied more to, visual and motor things. You may have things more tied to the language area. You may have things tied to the sensory. You might have it more tied to the amygdala, right? That emotional center that's going to regulate that fight-flight response. So I don't know what it looks like in your child.
Meaning, are you saying that the neurofeedback is going to look different in every child, kind of a thing? Yeah.
Okay. Because it's going to work, where in those networks, where was it having trouble? Some people are going to have more trouble in the emotional control area. Some are going to have more in the organizational. Some are going to, Daniel Amen wrote a book about, I think it's 7 types of ADHD. And it talks about, basically saying that there's different parts of the brain that are implicated in ADHD, and where you're struggling, where those, areas are you're struggling will indicate, where in the brain you're having that struggle. Well, okay. Yes, but that's only kind of part of the story, right? Because all those networks are really integrated, and all those parts of the brain are really interwoven.
Right.
And so what looked, like progress for one daughter took longer for another one. So,
and I'll throw in there how interwoven we are with then other brains in the family, right?
Absolutely.
So the story I would share, and actually we wrote up a case study. So if you want to hear about this family, hi Tammy, if you're listening, go up to the files. So I believe it's at the top of the page. But we looked at this family, or we didn't look at this family. We worked with this family. Tammy is a foster mom, and she ended up adopting 3 little baby girls. I shared a little bit about this in the What Now ADHD. I just shared one of the stories, but Ashlyn, Abigail, and Savannah. They came to Tammy really young. I won't go into too much detail because we have so many questions to get to, but these girls were struggling in just about every way. Abigail would be up 5 times a night on sleep medication, up 5 times, and not just awake, but like walking around the house, playing with toys, bugging her sisters. She would fight the medicine, and what improvement with her sleep habits after even just 1 month of neurofeedback sessions, sleeping through the night. Tammy will tell you. I said, Tammy, did it help with her sleep habits? She said, yes. Oh God, yes. I can't mimic her beautiful Southern accent, but let's see. One of the daughters, I think it was Ashlyn, I might be mixing up the girls, but one of them had such rocking behavior and anxiety and scratching and cuts and that kind of thing. All the cuts disappeared, the rocking stopped. And the youngest had quite a number of problems, and she actually was had to be sort of institutionalized for a period of time. And as she reintegrated in the family, that's where neurofeedback really helped Tammy, because Tammy was doing sessions too, and Tammy was able to pause, and respond more thoughtfully when, once this little girl was reintegrated back into the home. And they just had such a profound experience. So anyway, if you want to, there's another personal story, but you can also scroll through the group. I mean, you might have to scroll a little ways, but lots of moms with stories where I remember one family where the child jumped, I think, 2 reading levels doing neurofeedback, hadn't do anything else different, but jumped a couple of reading levels. Another family where reading comprehension just came online where it wasn't before. And then all those fun posts where the mom's like, he's cleaning the basement. What's going on? You've seen all these stories yourself, I know. So we have lots of those, but let's get to some of these other questions. Let's see. Angela asks, how long do the shifts last? You wanted to grab that one, I think, Christy.
How long does the shift last or the training last?
Yeah.
The training?
I assumed she meant, well, let's answer both questions.
Okay. So
yeah. And I'm going to check and see if any PMs have come in. Okay.
Okay. So when you think about the training, I think there's 2 factors to remember. Number 1, every brain has its own. So I guess what neurofeedback is doing is helping that brain be flexible and resilient. Okay. So some brains are born with more flexibility and resilience than others. And so I might be able to hold on to that training for 6 months to a year longer than my husband, who he just, maybe it's his age, maybe it's his diet, maybe it's his lifestyle, maybe it's stress. He doesn't handle stress as well. So I kind of equate it to, how does your person that you're wanting to train and see these changes in, how do they kind of respond and recoup from stress? That's kind of a good indicator of how long. So I usually try to get people through, quite a bit of sessions and see, how are you feeling, 40 sessions from now. Let's just make up that number. It's a good number to make up. Just make that up. You get through 40 sessions. How are you feeling then? And then there are people that I don't see for another 2-4 years. And then there are some that I see 6 months later. So it really depends on, kind of where they started, what their ability, your brain's ability to be flexible and resilient kind of to begin with. That would be the best way, I think, to answer that. So how long does it last? probably on average, I don't have people come back for a year or two at least, and some it's been 5.
I did a poll in the group, which I would love if people would scroll down who have done neurofeedback. Actually, I would love for you to do it too, because I just want to get a sense of what people are experiencing. I mean, I have my own idea, but I just thought a poll in the group would be fun too, and just give more data. But the question is, at what point in your neurofeedback training did you start to see shifts, clear shifts? So I usually see that, there's a bell curve. That is based on what you're talking about. I think it's based on the amount of stress in a person's life, the amount of reactivity in the family, whether mom and dad are doing the sessions. But most people seem to need or not need, but really start to see those shifts 20 to 40 sessions. Seems like a pretty small percentage that needs a lot more. And you can tell me if you've seen different. And then a small percentage, 1 to 20, and they're like, holy mackerel, what is this? That was my experience. Within 6 sessions, it was like, whoa. But that's a smaller percentage than what seems to be the norm.
Yeah, I typically see that, and I would agree with all of that. So I typically see the first signs or hear about the first signs. Really, the person's awareness level, typically I see change between session about 6 and 8. That's pretty, I mean, and I'm actually even thinking about a recent 80-year-old woman that I'm training who really pretty much had no awareness. Like, she was pretty out there. So between, I think it was session 7, actually, she said to me, and I remember making a note about it. She said, so explain to me again how this is working and tell me what I'm going to notice. And I said, I can't tell you what you're going to notice, but how do you feel? Right? And so we started talking about that, and she said, well, I don't know what it's doing, but it's doing something because I feel different. Well, how do you feel different? And she started to then elaborate and put that in words. So we're talking about an 80-year-old person who is in really okay health, but deals with, her husband has dementia. So lots of stress, and a lot of stress within her family for many years, right? So a lot less flexibility in that brain than our average client that we probably have come to us, right? But she was right on track. She was right on track in that 6 to 8, which I found very interesting. Another kiddo recently that I've been working with is 16. And mom has asked me, so when do you start to see changes? She asked me that early on. And I said, well, I don't want to give you that number because I don't want to, it could be longer for you. It could be less for you. And this kid was dealing with quite a bit of stress. So I didn't want to put it in their brain that if I say 6 to 8 and he doesn't feel anything until session 12, then he's going to go, this didn't work. And I'm not sitting here all this time. I'm done with this. Right. So I like to not say that number because I don't want to put a preconceived, I should have felt it. I'm doing it wrong. Like, there is no doing it wrong. You don't know how inflexible this thing is. And I don't. So we have to really remember that, I think, too. And, your 5-year-old, you may see really quick changes, and then another 5-year-old may take 20 sessions. I've had people that it takes 20 sessions before they're really aware of those changes.
How many sessions do husbands need? That's what I want to know. I want to get to that number.
My husband loves it, and he would do it every night if I would hook him up. But I've taught him how to hook himself up now, so he loves it. As a matter of fact, men was that was the biggest category of people that came consistently because they don't have to talk to anybody. They get to relax. It's quiet. Like, they loved it.
I love it.
So
ladies, get your husbands hooked up.
That's right. And they need it more than all of us, right?
I love working with seniors. Actually, in the the real moms of neurofeedback. He's not a mom, obviously, but 93-year-old Jim is one of the interviews. So go to the units, and the one that's called the real moms of neurofeedback. Just such a lovely person. Anyway,
That's awesome.
all right. I hope that helps, Angela. Let's see. And then Cecilia, you already answered Cecilia's question. Do you need maintenance? It really does vary, but yeah, it's a lifestyle thing. And I want to, let me add too, and then I want to get to this new question that just came in. That with nonlinear, it's actually progressive. With linear, you're gonna plateau because they're working on one thing or another. But yeah, I'm not going to tell y'all how many sessions I've done, but it's a lot. I continue to progress. It deepens my ability to respond differently in my marriage, with my kids, energy. I mean, all of it. So anyway, the question that just came in, somebody wanted to know about neurofeedback and OCD and eating disorder. I can take the OCD one. So I'll do that. Maybe you can speak to the eating disorder one.
Sure.
Or we can both chime in on that.
Yeah.
So that actually is one of the things that my daughter deals with. With OCD, what I've seen is that, well, I'll just sort of give an example with her. Part of her OCD would be if she were to relax, bad things would happen. So there was a time in her training, not when she first started, but just this year actually with COVID and everything, it's been a lot for her. I could see her relaxing in a session. Just the relax. I think I've shown before and after pictures in the group before a session, and she's just chill. But then I could see her trying to fight it, just gear it up. So when you've got OCD, you've got to have that openness to let it relax you. You can fight it. So that one's a big one. I guess that's my thought on that. Do you want to add anything to that, or?
Well, I mean, remember on the eating disorder, my son had a feeding disorder. So his issue was, fear of food, right? So that's different than an eating disorder like anorexia, bulimia, things like that. But I think what we have to understand is that some of the same mechanisms for things like awareness, perception, those are going to change. That's why it doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. That's why Neurooptimal is cool, because it's not targeting, we're just looking right here for this ADD that's right here. Right. Well, how do you know there's not eating over here and, anxiety over here and a concussion? But so that's what's so cool about Neurooptimal, because it just says, well, I got to fix all this stuff. I'm not going to just work here. I'm going to work everywhere I see these areas of stuck energy, and I'm going to release those patterns where they've been behaving in this way or functioning in this way for a while. I'm going to release those patterns so it can kind of function optimally. Now let's see what we've got. Well, gosh, now we've got, better organization. We've got better self-control. We can sleep better. We aren't fighting with our siblings. We are not afraid to interview. That was a big one I saw in one of my daughters. One of my stepsons did it for sleep, and he said, not only did it help my sleep, he said, I'm productive during the day. I actually can get up and get things done. And at the time, he was about 18 years old. So that's pretty profound for an 18-year-old who was not diagnosed with anything. Yeah. He just wanted to do it because he knew he didn't sleep well. So I always thought that was kind of interesting too. But this was actually referred to me, and I found out about this from a feeding clinic that see people from all over the world. So they're definitely, support behind eating concerns and neurofeedback.
And I would even throw in too, along the same lines as OCD, with an eating disorder, there has to be an openness and readiness to change, because you can fight it.
Yes.
They're like OCD. There's that. It's kind of an OCD around, food and control and keeping people out.
It's rigid, right? So it's a brain that's very rigid, that's very controlled, because here's where it can function. It can function right here really tightly, But once we start to move out of that, oh, it can't. It's got to go back, right? So this is where it's comfortable. So all of a sudden it starts doing neurofeedback, and now it can function here. It can function here, and it can function here, right? So those changes that you'll see are very slow and very gradual, and they're very rhythmic, and they're trying to get that body to that balanced homeostasis so that we're kind of dancing with life, right? We're not so rigid in the way we're responding to life.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yeah, that person who asked that question said thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see. So someone asked about how bumpy is the road? Something like that. Is it kind of a smooth process, or are there some sort of some ups and downs in the journey? What have you seen, Christy? And you worked with so many people, right in one-to-one.
I've seen both.
Yeah,
I've seen both. I've seen, again, how are they functioning in their environment at home? What kind of support do they have? How willing are they? Is it, a teen that's being dragged to do something they don't want to do? Is it, typically what I find is that, and I hate giving a session number, but I'm going to give one.
You keep going, because I'm gonna check again for anything that I'm missing.
Typically, I find people kind of they initially just see this real smoothness. Oh, this is great. Like, I'm able to relax. I'm feeling good. I love the sessions. And then all of a sudden they go, they start to dip a little bit. Not everybody, but commonly I have seen this in certain people. And they start to dip, and for some it could be sleep disturbance. That's usually where I see it. Maybe a little bit of back talk, irritability, emotion. So what that is those skills they've not been able to use well. All of a sudden they have this new skill. Like they can verbalize, they can express. They're not going to hold back. They're
a new skill that they're not very skilled at.
That's right. Yeah. And so people come in, they're like, we never had this before. We've never had this before. What? So, and I say, I am so excited for you. And they look at me like I'm what? Why would you be excited? Because you're telling me that I'm hearing evidence that limbic system that's been so stressed and so stuck in fight and flight forever is finally like relaxing. And now other parts of the brain are starting to get communication. And now that brain is starting to respond in ways it wasn't able to respond before. So it's a skill that they'll learn how to use, but they just need a little bit of time. So it's okay. We're not going to be all of a sudden, this train wreck back talker all of a sudden, right? So it's just, so you can call it bumps, you can call it dips, you can call it whatever you want to call it. I'm going to tell you I'm going to touch on this, and it may not be a question, but I see it commonly. People say, does it make you worse before you're better? It's really important to understand. This software isn't putting anything in your body. It's how that brain is responding to the information. Just like you sitting here listening to this conversation. How are you responding to this? You're either going to walk away and be like, that woman's crazy. I'm not listening to words she said. Or you're going to be like, you know what? She's believable. She's been through it. I trust her. I'm going to give it a try. I might sink or swim, but I'm going to do it. Right. So how you respond it's just information I'm giving you. That's all neurofeedback is doing. So what happens sometimes is when you hear people say, oh, it made me this, it made me this. That's how their brain just responded. And what happens is what's physically happening, I think, and I'm hypothesizing here, is that the awareness network, the default mode network of the brain, which is kind of on the top like this, if you put your hand on top of your head like this, that default mode network all of a sudden is like, ding, it's turned on. All of a sudden it's working in a different capacity because it's getting information. Now it doesn't have blocked energy way down here in the skull, right? In that limbic system. Now all of a sudden this default mode network up here, it's like, it's getting some information. It's like paying attention to things. It's increased, you know, the awareness that I've got a lot of anxiety. It didn't increase anxiety. It's increased your awareness to be able to know something ain't right.
Okay.
So
you know what?
I got a lot.
That's such a great explanation. It's turned it on. And I think that's a good way to talk about the executive function piece. It sounds like it turns it on. I was working just this last month with a family where husband had brain cancer, had all the treatment, and was really suffering from the treatment. So they rented a unit. My wife is the caregiver. She's given him all these sessions, and I'm just trying to encourage her to do sessions for herself. And she finally did. And she got sad.
Yeah.
So again, to this question of are there bumps? Nothing was done to her. This default mode network was turned on, and she could grieve. And when we can do that, when we can give respect to those processes, things start to open up and move more smoothly. But yeah, I've never heard that explanation. That's really nice.
Think of it this way too. So all of a sudden she's had this husband who's been through this traumatic, you know, ongoing series of treatments and medications and uncertainties. And there's a lot of fear, and she's been this rock, and she has had to like hold it together and get in places and be strong and do
like
those
the moms
things, right?
in this group, right?
So for the kids. All of a sudden she's got this tool that's saying, it's okay. It's all right. It's okay. Relax. We've got this. I've got this. You don't have to be so inflexible, right? It's like whether it's OCD or it's, you know, this woman, all of a sudden that central nervous system just says, okay, I can sit back like this now, right? I don't have to be like this. I can be here now.
Right. Which is, you know, in this very tight place is where inflammation is. Inflammation is linked to depression. And I think they're linking it to all kinds of things.
Absolutely are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's another good explanation of why it doesn't matter what your diagnosis is.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. And I personally think ADHD is one of the most difficult things to really accurately diagnose.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I put a little short webinar, maybe it's a 20-minute somewhere down in the group. I think I put it in the units too, but about a family systems perspective on ADHD and diagnosis in general. I mean, and even finally, thankfully, the NIMH is starting to move away from sort of these categorical diagnoses. It's just, anyway.
Yes, we won't have those. Sneak peek, what I'm learning in grad school is we won't have this DSM-5 soon. So we won't have this, yes, it's important to know maybe what you're dealing with so that you know what, you know, treatment options and therapies and support options look like.
But to contextualize it.
But to put it in a box isn't, you just can't put it in a box.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. And Bowen family systems theory, I'm just going to plug that. This is what Bowen thought 70 years ago. Anyway, a broader perspective, I think, helps. So we're going to wrap up. I don't see any more questions coming in. I think we covered the ones that were submitted already. If you are thinking about this for your family, I can help with rentals. So just reach out to me directly. And both Christy and I can help if you want to purchase this equipment. We'll answer any questions. We'll spend time with you if you want to try to help you figure out, is this right for your family? So don't hesitate to reach out. Let's see. Anything, Christy? How can people reach you?
I think, let me just say one thing real quick.
Sure.
I think one thing that I always tell people when someone calls to inquire is, will this help me? Or they're trying to determine, will this help me?
Mhm.
Here's what I tell them. Neurofeedback, it doesn't matter if you do linear or nonlinear. Doesn't matter. Just like prescription, Ritalin, Strattera, Concerta, whatever it is, Focalin. None of those things take away ADHD. What they do is they help you, what NeuroOptimal does, what neurofeedback does, helps you manage where you are. Just like what some people want from medication. It helps them manage what they are.
Mhm.
What happens with medication is that they don't get all the, the support and the help that they're looking for, right? So I always tell people, it doesn't take away that diagnosis, doesn't just magically make everything better, but it really helps that brain, that person deal with whatever it is, no matter what we call it. We can call it ADD, we can call it anxiety, we can call it autism, we can call it whatever. Nothing. It just helps you function optimally. And so ultimately, that's why it helps all of us. Just because it's just helping us all function optimally. So
it's not a treatment, it's not a cure, but it helps people deal with what they're dealing with.
That's right. That's right. It's highly customized, highly specific to that individual. So the number of sessions, how long they maintain it, what it's going to work on, when, how, where, all of that is very specific to that individual and what they're dealing with in their life, what their lifestyle is and so forth. So I think that's really like my biggest, what I want people to take away. And then you decide, but it isn't something you can do 5 sessions and you're going to like see these mountains of change. That's not typically what I ever see, ever. And I've seen some pretty amazing things in a couple of sessions happen, but I've never seen life-forming transformation in 5 sessions. It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. So that's my closing thought on that. Sorry.
Okay. All right. No, wonderful. Always love to listen to you talk, Christy.
Yeah. People can just send me a private message through the group if they want to, or they can do Be Your Best Friend, but you can do it through the Facebook group. That's easiest.
Okay. Sounds good. We're going to do, I'm going to do a live Q&A with Ilea Shrigley on autism and neurofeedback Thursday night. And guess what? I'm scheduling a live Q&A for the group with Dr. Brown.
Yay!
Yes. So Dr. Brown is one of the co-creators of Neurooptimal Neurofeedback. And I'm just going to ask him all kinds of questions about what's the difference between linear and nonlinear neurofeedback, and why did he come up with this, and what problems did he see in the linear world. So that's not scheduled yet, but it's coming. So thanks everybody for listening in. If you have more questions, keep posting them and we'll just answer them in the group. Have a good night, y'all.
Bye.